Daisy was set on having the last word. She wanted to win the argument, to hammer her point home without realizing how heavy her words truly were. Then she said it. "You argue way too much for a guy. No wonder you're so small down there." The instant those words left her lips, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The tension they'd been building didn't explode into anger. It just collapsed into a thick silence. Raymond didn't snap back with rage. He didn't retaliate with an insult. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply stood there, frozen. His jaw clenched tightly, his fists curled just a little, and his eyes darkened with something far deeper than anger. It was pain. It was humiliation. It was a wound Daisy hadn't meant to open. Without a single word, he turned and walked away. Daisy stayed rooted, expecting him to come back, to yell, to argue, to fight, like he always did. But he never did. That silence, that unbearable stillness, was worse than any outburst he could have thrown. Most couples argue, shout, maybe storm off, but eventually find their way back to each other. That was always their pattern. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but their fights had a rhythm, a push and pull that always ended with some kind of reconciliation. But this time was different. That night, Raymond didn't return to their bed. At first, Daisy convinced herself he just needed space, that he was cooling off. Maybe he'd sneak in after she was asleep. Maybe by morning everything would feel normal again. But when she reached for him the next day, his side of the bed was untouched. A creeping unease settled in her chest. This wasn't like him. No matter how bad their past fights had been, he had always been there, even if just physically. She climbed out of bed, searched the house, expecting to find him in the kitchen or on the couch. Instead, she found him in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, withdrawn. He wasn't sulking or angry. He wasn't doing anything. He just sat there, empty. Daisy hesitated in the doorway, waiting for him to say something, but he stayed silent. So she spoke first. "Raymond." "Nothing. Why are you sleeping in here?" "Still nothing." She pressed on, asking if he was still angry, if he was coming back to bed, but he barely glanced her way. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with anger, nor with a desperate plea for understanding. It was quiet, an unbearable silence so loud it spoke more than words ever could. Days passed without change. At first, Daisy told herself he just needed time, that he'd get over it, that things would return to normal. But they didn't. Raymond withdrew completely. When she entered a room, he left. When she tried to talk, he barely acknowledged her. When she reached to touch him, he pulled away. It wasn't just anger. It was something darker, something final. It felt like he had erased her from his life without a single explanation. Desperate, Daisy tried to reach him the only way she knew, by cooking his favorite meals, hoping the comfort of familiar food would melt the wall between them. But he barely touched his plate. She left little notes, made small apologies in actions instead of words. Nothing reached him. For the first time, Daisy realized this wasn't just a fight anymore. This was breaking, something fragile cracking beyond repair. She tried lightening the mood with a joke. No smile. She reached for his hand, fingers brushing his as they passed, but he stiffened. Nothing worked. Then the truth hit her cold. For years, she had thought arguing meant there was still something worth fighting for. As long as they shouted, they cared. But now, the silence between them was heavier than any yelling match. It was emptiness. And that emptiness felt like something inside had already died. Daisy hadn't realized her words hadn't just cut in the moment. They had reopened an old, buried wound Raymond had spent a lifetime trying to forget. He'd always been self-conscious about his size, but it was a secret he guarded fiercely. Growing up, he was teased, mocked, whispered about behind his back. A rumor in high school, born from careless locker room talk, had spread like wildfire. He still saw the face of the girl he had a crush on when she heard it. Not angry, not sympathetic, just indifferent, as if he'd vanished from her world. That moment clung to him into adulthood. No matter how hard he tried to bury it, the insecurity lived under the surface. His last serious relationship had ended in the worst way imaginable. He caught his girlfriend cheating. When he asked why, she didn't cry or plead. She just shrugged and said the cruelest thing he ever heard. "You just don't satisfy me." That broke him. Since then he locked away his pain, never letting anyone close enough to see it. He built up his confidence, telling himself he'd moved on. Then he met Daisy. She was different. With her, he didn't feel small or like he had to prove anything. He felt safe, loved. He thought he'd left the past behind, until that night. You argue too much for someone who's barely a man. No wonder you're so tiny down there. Just one sentence, and everything unraveled. It sent him hurtling back to the hallways filled with laughter, betrayal, and shame. But this time, the pain came not from strangers or a cheating ex, but from Daisy, the one person he thought would never say something like that. For the first time in their marriage, he wasn't sure he could ever see her the same way again. Daisy hoped time would heal it, but the longer she waited, the farther he drifted. One evening, determined to fix things, she entered the guest room where he'd been staying, expecting to find him scrolling his phone. Instead, the room was empty. The shower was running, and his phone lay lit on the bed. She hesitated. She wasn't the type to invade privacy. But then a notification caught her eye. Subject: regarding divorce proceedings. Her breath hitched. Divorce? No, it had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't about one argument. This wasn't just anger. Raymond was planning to leave her. When he stepped out of the bathroom, she was already waiting, heart pounding. "Are you really thinking about divorcing me over one fight?" she asked softly. For the first time in weeks, he looked at her, but his eyes held no anger, no sadness, just emptiness. Finally, his voice broke the silence, calm, steady, heavy with truth. "You think this is just about that night?" It was the moment she understood. It wasn't only the insult. It was everything. The unresolved fights, the growing distance, the wounds they ignored for too long. That night was the final blow, but their foundation had been cracking long before. Desperate, Daisy threw herself into making amends. She apologized endlessly, not just with words, but through actions. She cooked, left notes, tried to spark conversation about anything, the weather, their day, memories. But his replies were always the same: brief, hollow, empty. The most terrifying part was knowing he already had the answer she was too scared to ask: whether he still wanted to stay. And his silence said it all. Daisy had always believed regret could be fixed, that if you were willing to try, any mistake could be undone. But this wound was different. No apology could heal it. Then one evening, she passed the guest room and stopped cold. Raymond was packing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, clothes folded neatly inside. Panic flooded her. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She stepped inside, voice barely steady. "Are you really leaving?" He exhaled, gripping the suitcase's edge. He didn't answer right away. When he finally faced her, his voice was steady but weighted with truth. "I don't know if I can get past this." His words struck harder than any argument. She expected anger, a lashing out, a torrent of bottled-up resentment finally spilling free. But this quiet uncertainty was worse. Tears blurred her vision. Pride no longer mattered. "I love you," she choked out. "I messed up. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. Just tell me what to do." For the first time in weeks, a flicker passed across his face. Hesitation, conflict, something beyond emptiness. He was silent for a long moment before saying, "You can't take back what you said, and I can't unhear it." Her heart sank. But then he added, "Maybe I don't want to walk away. Not yet." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. And for now, that fragile something was all Daisy had left to hold on to. Raymond didn't leave that night, but the damage lingered. The road ahead would be long. And Daisy knew some wounds wouldn't fade quickly. The real question was whether their love could survive the silence between them.